This and every episode of the AVB Podcast is brought to you by our incredible sponsors. Make sure you find links for them, today's guest, and of course all our other social media down in the description below. You can comment, ask questions that you think we might have missed, and of course don't forget to subscribe and click on that bell to make sure you're getting notifications of all our episodes. Alright, let's get to it. How's it going, everybody? This week on the AVB Podcast, we're back at Imperial Lounge with Mar Meredith from For Esme. How's it going?
That's good.
Good.
Happy to be in Windsor.
Yeah, it's fun. So we caught you. You guys are from Toronto,
yeah.
Right? And we happened to catch you because you're in town to play at Fog today. Mm-hmm. You were in here earlier for a performance video, and man, am I impressed! I love your music.
Thank you so much.
It's interesting to me that you guys work with so many keyboards.
Yeah, people get a little alarmed when we show up for like a venue like Fog with all of our stuff, but we're getting pretty good at making it work in any space. But yeah, the record was written all electronically, so much of the stuff that's happening needs to be played through MIDI keyboards. Right.
Okay, so let's go, as we usually do on this show, let's go right to the beginning from you. I want to know all about you. So tell me, where were you born and raised, mom and dad, all of that shit?
All right, I was born and raised in Peterborough, Ontario, which is northeast of Toronto. Right. I actually grew up north of there in Lakefield, which is even smaller. I grew up on a farm, and I loved music from a really young age.
Farm girl, eh?
Yeah.
Tell me about being a farm girl.
My mom was a sheep farmer. She's like a total badass, and she was sheep farming. My dad was a lawyer. Until I was...
Fuck the lawyer, I got a badass sheep farming mom.
She's just pretty cool that she was doing it on her own, and she had sheep and chickens until I was like 5 or 6, and then when my sister was born, I think it got a little crazy having toddlers like running around the tractor.
Right.
But we had chickens till I was 13 or something, and yeah, it was a really lovely place to grow up, but it was quite isolated, so I definitely loved music a lot.
So you're the oldest?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, okay, so explain to me, you said mom did it on her own. Was dad around? Was mom and dad separated?
No, he was around. She'd started the farm before she met my dad.
Oh, okay.
And so it was.
And plus he's a lawyer, so
and he was commuting a lot from Toronto when I was really little, and then he moved his practice to Lakefield when I was, I don't know when it was, but when I was little.
But young?
Yeah.
But so basically you spent
He helped, but it was her thing.
It was her thing? And so did you get dragged out there and have to do all the farm chores and all that stuff too? Or?
Yes and no. Like, I was pretty young, so more often I was just like in a backpack or like thrown on the tractor. I liked it. Apparently I sleep really well in vehicles, and my mom says it's because I was always on the tractor in a backpack as an infant. So,
that's funny.
Yeah.
So how long did that go? Did that go up your entire childhood? Or?
Yeah, my parents still live there. And then I went to Queen's for university, and when I was there, I was studying politics and psych, which I think if you listen to the lyrics of my music, I feel like that's a big basis of what I write about. And I liked school, but I was quickly realizing that I sang in a chamber choir and in high school, and I was pretty passionate about that, and I was competing in singing stuff and dance stuff, so I missed all that. And at university I started kind of working on it because I didn't have an outlet to do it through the school. I started writing my own music for the first time, and that was really exciting because I hadn't tried that before.
So all your early musical experience, that was through the school, like through training that way, or did you have music at home too?
Yeah, my parents aren't super musical, but they like music a lot. We had a piano growing up, and I took piano lessons all the time. I annoyed my parents so much by playing the same shit over and over and over again. Like, I was obsessed with something corporate when I was in early high school, which is kind of like an emo band, and
right.
They had this 9-minute piano song called Confronting that I loved to play. I thought it was so great, and my parents would be like, if we ever have to hear that 9 minutes again, like, we might kill ourselves. Please don't. But yeah. But I hadn't really ever experimented with writing my own stuff until university.
So as you're going through grade school and high school, and you're, doing the chamber music stuff, and you're kind of playing around at home, where does music sit in your life at that point? Because you said you were really passionate about the chamber music thing, but I'm guessing it didn't take up all your time.
No, I was honestly really passionate about dance when I was younger. Like,
okay.
I loved dancing. I did every kind of it. My poor parents had to drive me to dance class like every night of the school week.
Apparently you could dance to the stuff that's happening outside here. I'm guessing it's going to come across here, so sorry.
But yeah, music, I vividly remember being really young and seeing a choir perform something really beautiful and getting goosebumps and just like feeling the emotion behind that. And also growing up on the farm, I mean, I was alone a lot, and so I listened to a lot of music, and I found lyricism has always been really important to me, and I felt like I was like connected with the broader world through listening to music. My mom always played Joni Mitchell and the Beatles and like just great stuff around the house that resonated really strongly with me. Yeah.
Okay. So as you're kind of coming through, and you said you were obsessed with dance, right? Mm-hmm. So do you remember how you first got sort of involved with dance? Was that something mom and dad threw you in, or was it something you asked for?
My mom, I think, was always like, where did you come from? Because I'm like, I want to do ballet. And she's like this sheep farmer being like, okay, if you insist. But no, I always wanted to do it. I just loved it. I was like obsessed with performing. I used to make home videos all the time. I'd force my sister to be in them. She hated it. She is not like into performance stuff. I'd like place her in the middle and like dance around and lip sync and sing. I always loved it. I don't know.
Do you still have those videos?
I do, but they're on like those mini VHS tapes and I don't know how to play them. Which kind of for now is okay that I can't. I don't really want to see them, but I want to see them someday.
That's funny. So, okay, just for timeline's sake for me, how old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay, so you get into university, and then you start, university you said is where you start writing your own music?
Yeah.
Talk to me about how that process works for you.
Well, I actually didn't get into the like chamber choir that I wanted to at university, and I was pretty devastated about it because it was like, oh, I'm not gonna get to do. And when I say chamber choir, like both these choirs were super contemporary. Like some of it was like old chamber music, but a lot of it was fun contemporary covers and stuff.
I had a high school choir that was very much the same thing. It was like 50-man versions of like Blackbird.
Yeah, we did Blackbird for sure. Yeah, so I was sad and I missed it, and so I bought a keyboard and I started playing in my room at university. But it was actually in the summers between school. I worked at a summer camp, and it was funny. It was a boys' summer camp. I was the laundry lady, but some of the other guys who were there like played music all the time, and I hadn't really been around a lot of that, and I was super inspired by it. And I had a friend who actually one summer we worked in the kitchen together, and he was playing guitar and writing songs all the time, and I just thought they were so great, and it really moved me to be like, well, I could also do that, I think. And so I worked on the guitar. Do me a favor, talk me through that one a little bit more, because it's interesting to me.
Your path into music seems very structured, and probably more structured than what a lot of, for lack of a better term, bar musicians end up having coming through.
Well, it's funny you say that though, because I don't have a lot of formal musical training at all. Like I did some Royal Conservatory, but not much. I hated practicing.
But see, I don't even necessarily mean that it was formal training, but it was definitely more structured because you came through like the school system, right?
Yeah.
So like where a lot of the people that we'll talk to on this show, they got their experience kind of like what you're talking about, but you didn't do it till university.
Yeah,
but they were 11-year-old kids like locked up in their bedrooms for like 4 years and shit, right?
Right.
So I wonder for you, because you came at it at such it's not that late.
But no, I feel like it was late compared to a lot of my peers.
Do you have that? Do you have that feeling? Do you walk around with that a little bit?
Yes and no. I think that I was really nervous to write my own music. I didn't really believe in myself as a songwriter. Mm-hmm. I just cared so deeply about other people's lyrics that I hadn't really, like I was a kid who scribbled lyrics on everything. Like all my notebooks were covered in other people's lyrics. And I don't know, honestly, I think I remember vividly getting a bad mark on a poem I wrote in high school and being like, maybe I'm not good at this. Like, I don't know.
Really?
But then, yeah,
I love the idea of grading poetry. But anyway,
I know. I actually just last year did not last year, I guess it's 3 years ago now, this book called The Artist's Way. I don't know if you've heard of it. A lot of people do it to like get rid of creative blocks or writer's block. And a lot of it is figuring out what younger experiences led you to be like, oh, I'm not good at this. And that was one that I was like, oh yeah, I really remember being pretty gutted about that. But yeah, and then all of a sudden, well, actually, the first song I wrote was at this summer camp, and it was about this boy that I liked that was there, and it was stupid, but it was catchy, and all the girls that worked there were like, the song's really good, and it tapped into this feeling that a bunch of us felt at that uncomfortable, like 17, 18, or I guess, yeah, like 18, 19-year-old age, where we didn't know how to communicate emotionally with the men that we were interested in at all. So part of it was about talking to this person in my head instead of for real.
Nice.
And they were all like, you should play it at the coffee house. It's so good. It's really good.
They had a coffee house at the
camp.
Yeah.
He won't know it's about him. No one's going to know it's about him. Everyone knew exactly what it was about. It was super embarrassing. I was like going to murder my friends. It was like, you really gave me some of the worst advice ever. But I liked performing the song.
I don't think so. I think that might have been the move.
Yeah. Anyway, as soon as it was addictive.
Because if you would have gone into it thinking, oh well, everybody's going to know exactly what I'm talking about. There's no way you would have gotten on that fucking stage.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible. But yeah, I wrote a lot of songs that summer, and then on and through the school year, and I just kept going. So at the beginning, I was doing a lot more like acoustic guitar, and I played a lot on my Nord at the time.
You played a lot of what now?
And my keyboard was
on your Nord.
Yeah.
Sorry, I really heard a different word entirely, and I'm going, what? Apparently you invented an instrument too. All right.
No. And then, yeah, so for Esme started in 2013, I guess. I was playing with a band for the first time, and it was exciting. I was just at the beginning playing under my own name. And yeah, we made a record. Not really anyone knows about it. It was self-titled. I had no idea what I was doing. Musically, I still think it's decent. Like, I mean, you know, I feel like most people, when they read an old essay they wrote, feel embarrassed. It's still a little like, ugh. But,
right.
But I think it was good.
You'd make different choices now, but you can still tap your foot.
But I don't feel bad. Like, when I listen to the lyrics, I'm like, no, that was really true. That was authentic for how I felt and what I was going through. And I don't feel embarrassed about that. What I feel more embarrassed about it is just that I had no idea how to navigate the music industry at all. I didn't know how to network. I didn't know anything. So the record didn't really like make a very big impact. It did okay. I mean,
right. What does that mean though? It's funny
like,
because
I didn't know how to like get blogs to write about it, or how to get. I had good, decent turnout at shows, but I didn't have a lot of press at all. I didn't have any interest from like labels or agents or managers. I just didn't know about any of that stuff. I didn't care about any of that.
You just described careers of people I know. Like, you're 30, got into this, 10 years ago, give or take?
Not even. I mean, it's less, really, yeah.
And you're saying that with your first album, what you're embarrassed about is that the record labels didn't come pounding down your door?
I just didn't know, but it's not bad. But then, so my band kind of fell apart. It was a real ad hoc band. Like, they were great, but
It was not for Esme?
That record came out under the name For Esme, which was kind of like, I think we decided that right before we put it out or something. Okay. And then immediately the band fell apart. That's when I first had to learn about like firing people, and it was horrible and it wasn't good.
Ooh.
But then also,
are you willing to talk about any of that stuff? Because it's interesting. I don't want to I don't want to like light fires and shit like that.
No. I picked. I found all my players on Craigslist, and they were great. But I quickly, once we started doing it for real, I was like,
chemistry.
Well, yeah, it was chemistry. It was like professionalism. They were great dudes. Great dudes.
You met musicians for the first time.
Yeah, who weren't as driven as me, and that's fine. But mainly the big thing that ended up happening was my drummer, who was really great. And at a certain time, I had a really great band I was excited about, and my drummer's like, "Bad news, I'm having a kid. I can't go on tour." And I don't think I can play in the band anymore. And he was kind of my like strongest link. He was the one. And so I was having a bit of a meltdown about that, and it ended up being like the biggest blessing, because up until that point, it had never occurred to me to produce the music that I was making. I was just writing it on the piano and writing it on the guitar and working with my producer friend, Jamie, who's awesome, and I still work with him very closely. But he was kind of like, fuck him. Like, why don't you just go on, get Logic and just learn how to use a MIDI keyboard. You're capable of it. And I didn't know that I was, I guess. And then anyway, that just opened up this huge door. And all of a sudden, I think it's interesting looking back, because I remember thinking that it was like a real low, but out of it came all of the records Sugar, which came out in 2014. And my new bandmates at the time, like, we had so much fun making it, but I, for the first time ever, was able to make music like the music that I liked, which I wasn't doing before. Like, I grew up, like, in high school, I adored, like, Metric. I thought Emily Haines was, like, the coolest, most badass feminist. I love Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, like, but it hadn't occurred to me that I could make that. And so all of a sudden, when I had all these tools to make a different kind of sound, it was like, oh, this is so much more me than, like, the girl playing acoustic guitar or something, because I wasn't even good at guitar.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was amazing. It was really exciting, and we had so much fun.
It's so funny that you put it that way, because it's, with artists of all kinds, well, with people in general, we look for permission to do stuff a lot of times.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, like, I'm 40 years old and I'm just learning now that you don't need permission to do most of the shit that you want to do. You just got to go out and do it, right? But talk to me about that process, because was it literally just like that for you? Was it like opening a door, or was it something that sort of like slowly occurred to you?
It definitely took a while to get a grip on how to use Logic, but once I realized,
but that's just a learning curve. I mean, like,
but once I got it, like, the first time I found an arpeggiator, I was like, oh my god, there's a driving beat here, and suddenly I want to write a song that's way more pumping and, like, has hook and is less about being like an emotional tale. Not that they lacked emotion, but it just got more fun. And I guess that's when we enter back into, like, I quit dance when I was 13 or 14, didn't dance again, except for when I was, like, at the bar with my friends, until I started writing this electronic music. And then I was, like, moving around my office, writing music, moving, and I realized it just was such a different feeling, because it's coming from inside in a different way. Yeah, and honestly, like, it took a long time to make that record. But now when I look back on it, like, it really felt like all of a sudden the gates were open and it was a different, great thing.
Tell me about the record. So, because you had some pretty good success with it, right?
You know, I don't know how people define success.
Yeah, okay.
We had some great opportunities. We got to go play South by Southwest. We played the inaugural Way Home Festival. We had a lot of interest from all those industry folks, which was cool and exciting and also scary.
Talk to me about that process.
I was much better at this point and, like, being like, oh, you have to go out there and talk to people and network. But I also hate that, because I just wish, I always want the art to just speak for itself, and that's not the climate that we live in. So, it's my least favorite line from working musicians. If you want the art to speak for itself, that's fine, then tell me what you do for a living, because it's not music. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly, and you're totally right about that. But honestly, it's interesting, because when I think back to when we finished that record and we were, like, getting ready to put it out, I had so much doubt, so much self-doubt, which is easy to forget, because then a bunch of great stuff happened and it was like, oh, everything's awesome. And then when I was back in self-doubt mode before writing this record, I was like, oh, what is this feeling? And then I actually went back and, like, found an old journal entry, and I was like, oh, I felt this way, exactly this way before. It's just the cycle of writing something new and growing as an artist and being scared.
Journal entry.
I journal a lot. I journal every day.
How did that get started?
I've always done it a bit, like, even in university when I first started writing, I would do, like, stream of consciousness writing, because I found it often, like, cleared the way for the good stuff. But then when I was doing this course, The Artist's Way, it's like a book about getting rid of your writer's block. It demands that you write 3 pages every day, stream of consciousness, because it helps you focus and clear your head, and I found that worked very, very well for me, so I really try to keep it up.
And do you keep up with it? Are you daily?
I'm not flawless, but I haven't done it.
Why not? No, I mean, no. You're not being graded here.
No, but I didn't do it today because we left early and whatever, but I would say every other day this week I've definitely done it. So I try. I get in really good waves of doing it every day. And then I sometimes lose my steam depending on what we're up to.
Do you ever get anything good out of it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Rarely do the songs come out of it, although sometimes. But so often I find I will figure out a feeling that I have. Like, there's this great quote I remember seeing a couple years back that's like, I write to know how I feel. And that's what I do. Like, I'm so in the moment all the time that I think that's a really good self-reflective passage to be like, oh, check in with yourself. How do you feel? What are you thinking about? What are you concerned about? What are you angry about? What are you excited about? And that's, yeah, like it's not like I will like pen a song in that in those pages usually, but sometimes a really strong concept will form quickly and be like, I feel really strongly about this.
Do you have moments where you do just turn it into song lyrics as you're writing? Yeah.
Not super often, but it's definitely happened a number of times.
It's funny because you're talking about stream of consciousness at that point, and you and I both know that when you're writing a song, even when you're stream of consciousness, it's not stream of consciousness. You're sort of like, you're polishing a little bit.
Well, I don't know. I have such a strong inner critic. Like, I'm always questioning anything I'm writing, so it's not.
Right.
Yeah. I think that the stream of consciousness helps you be more relaxed.
What I'm interested in, I know you said that you don't typically get songs out of the stream of consciousness stuff, but have you pulled material out of it? Like, have you taken it directly?
Definitely.
And how do they compare to your other pieces?
I don't know. Like, I think a lot of my best songwriting is stream of consciousness in a way, but it's not usually in that format of like the morning pages. It's more often like if I get into it. I think a lot about creative flow, and I don't think it's an easy thing to tap into, especially for me. Like I said, I have such a strong inner critic, but when I do tap into it, it's like very liberating, and it can be really exciting. I was actually just writing about this today for another interview, but I think the feeling of like tapping into something that I feel really clearly in that way, and when it comes out into a song quickly, it's like, it's euphoric. It's like the best high. It's the best thing, and I chase it all the time, and I don't get it all the time. But
I think the question I'm leaning towards most right now is you keep referring to some very specific language. Now you talk about the name of the book again.
Oh, The Artist's Way.
The Artist's Way.
Yeah.
And I'm not completely familiar with the book itself, but I'm sure I've heard of it a couple of times.
Yeah, probably.
But you're also, the language that you just use is very specific about tapping into flow. So flow is a very specific psychological study of artistry. So I'm wondering mostly if you look into that part of it, or if you're just grabbing the language from like colloquial conversation.
I'm obsessed with psychology.
I knew it.
So I read psych studies for fun. I research psych stuff all the time. When I was writing this new record, Righteous Woman, I spent a lot of time reading about...
Well, you said in university you were taking psych, right?
Yeah.
But you said something else first, and I leaned on that more.
I took politics.
Politics
Yeah.
is what I was thinking about. Yeah, but psych
I
was
majored
the
in
other one.
politics. I minored in psych. They both play in. I think psych, though, has always been super, like, I think one of the reasons I like writing music so much is because I'm kind of obsessed with knowing myself properly, fully. Like, real, full self-awareness to me is a sort of, like, I don't want to say enlightenment, but something about, like, it's really important to me. And I've always found that reading psych studies can be very comforting in this way, because you realize that something that you feel is not in your head. It's like a universal thing, or it's something that a huge amount of women feel, or a huge amount of people who grew up in a certain, like, there's all these things that you realize, oh, this is kind of a normal human condition, or you can understand the factors behind a feeling, and I like getting to the bottom of that kind of thing a lot.
Did you take psych in general, or did you go into any specific areas?
Took it in general. I liked it all. It was my minor, so I didn't take
well, you said you were into politics, so I mean that actually does kind of focus what you're doing in psych anyway. So talk to me about the politics side of it, because I fucking hate politics. I hate anything to do with, I love organizing things, which by definition means you have to be political, right? But I hate the idea of politics in general. Like, it creeps me out. I don't like people that, despite the fact that I am one of these people, I don't like people that want to be in charge, especially in the system that we have now. Right now, to me, if you want to run the system, there's something fucking wrong with you.
I agree with that. Yeah, I didn't love studying. Oh, I liked studying politics because I found it really interesting. And I think specifically, I really got some of my feminism like awoken in me through studying politics. I had a couple really,
You're woke
really
as fuck, or?
I'm trying to be woke. It's hard. I think a lot of writing this record for me was like facing and interrogating my privilege, which is a lot as like a white straight woman who got to go to private school and university. Like, I think about that stuff a lot. And for politics, like, I'm really interested in it because I have such a drive to see the world be better. which makes me hate politics because it's horrible right now.
Yeah,
it's so horrible. It's so depressing. It seems impossible. I feel like hopeless about it a lot. Helpless too. But I think it's really important to be engaged. Like, I know right now there's a municipal election coming up, and we were all talking about it in the van here today, and it's like, we really need to be informed citizens who know who we're voting for in terms of councillors for our city and the mayor and all these things, because the more we know, like, most people don't give a shit. So we need to. We really need to.
Right.
So yeah, I understand the distaste for politics 100%. I agree, but I also believe in trying to make the best choice, I guess.
But what does that mean to you then?
The best choice?
Well, I mean, what does it mean that, what does it mean to be involved? Like, is just getting out and voting good enough?
I don't think so. No, that's a big one. The voter turnout is pretty abysmal in all places in North America. But no, like, I don't know, I think about it a lot as an artist too. Like, for me, it's really important. The world we're living in is so fucked right now, I think, that I need my art to be trying to make it better. Okay. In some capacity, whether it's like just helping people feel that they're less alone in a feeling that they're having, or like, I don't know, one of the songs on our record is about political apathy and like tuning in versus tuning out, and how it's hard. Like, there's no right answer. If you're too tuned in, like for me, I know I get a lot of if I want to know what's really going on in the world, like, Twitter has it happening second by second, and it is also the most depressing place in the world because the things that are happening all over the world are super depressing. But yeah, as an artist, I think it's important to be trying to be part of the good fight, and for me, that's changing all the time. The more I learn about what injustice is. Like, when I first started writing music about feminism, from a feminist perspective, like, I wasn't thinking nearly enough about like the treatment of Indigenous people in this country because I didn't know enough, and now I do, and now I'm like, that is so much more important than like so much of the white women-based feminism that was my entry point, my gateway, but now I'm like broadening it and realizing, like, we know that women of color paved the way for feminism, and they do not get enough credit, and like, there's just all these things I'm learning all the time about how to be a better member of any group. And I don't mean like pushing an agenda, but I do have an agenda in terms of wanting just to see the world be a more equal place.
It's funny because you get a lot, the political conversation right now is so polarized that I think people forget that we're all fighting for the same thing. Like, and I mean, whether intentionally or unintentionally, whatever, my Facebook, and I'm an old man, so I use Facebook.
I have Facebook. I don't like it, but I have it.
So I use it and I like it. That's what makes me an old man. But like, I'll look at my Facebook and I've got everything from, like, people who watch this will know who I'm talking about. John Lidke, who's, every third post is fuck Nazis, to like guys who literally, I think I saw a meme this morning that was talking about how much of a criminal Hillary is, despite the fact that nobody on the left talks about Hillary anymore. Like, it's
yeah.
But it's so polarized. Like, you'll see the people on either side call the other people traitors, and look at them like they're enemies, and not even catch on to the idea that that's exactly what they're fighting against.
Totally. I thought it would be a good idea to dive into like a big Twitter storm a couple weeks ago during the Brett Kavanaugh trial. Or not trial, his job interview. I guess we should call it his job interview. Because
it wasn't a trial, which is the other thing that's...
Yeah, it was just seeing if he should be on the Supreme Court, which, I mean, it seems to me he shouldn't. But anyway, I was trying to engage with people because I realized there's that divide, and it's like people screaming into an echo chamber of backing up their own ideas. And I thought, I'm going to try to engage with some people here. One of which was like a woman who was like, people need to stop destroying his life. And I was just like, listen, like, here's what my perspective is, that it seems like there's a lot of people corroborating these women's stories, and does that interest you? Like, and she was like, no one's corroborated their stories. And I was like, well, where do you get your news? And then she blocked me. And then that happened like 3 times with 3 different people, and I was like, I don't know how to, I'm trying to not be, like, one thing I've witnessed a lot in the last 2 years in my own like political realms, which are in the arts community. They're so left-leaning that you forget that it's so much farther ahead than a lot of other scenes.
And in the arts community, you actually, what I've noticed, and I don't mean to trample on you here, but the one thing that I do notice is that you're right, it is super left-leaning until it's not. And then the arts community who are not left-leaning, for some reason, are so far to the other fucking side that like you kind of don't want to be around them. Like it would be nice to see some more like middle of the road from both ends.
No, yeah, that's interesting.
But we're artists, right?
It's been more like I've seen a lot of what I see call out culture where, and especially like in one context, but in many contexts, people calling each other out for not being woke enough. And I think that's fair. But I think my experience has always been on both sides of this coin, that calling people in is a lot more useful than calling people out publicly. Public shaming doesn't really get people on board with a good cause, I find.
To me, that's exactly where I was going when you said you decided to weigh in on one of these like public debates. Okay. And to me, it's like, there is no public debate. There's no public debate whatsoever. There's no conversation about this stuff. What you get is people who have decided they're going to tell you what it is. Right. And the problem is
they don't want to hear,
and it's on both sides.
Side.
Yeah. They showed up to tell, and very much, and this isn't like comparing Nazis to whatever. This is very much like people are stupid.
Yeah.
And like when they weigh in on this stuff, it's so rare, and it's my favorite form of phony internet shit is like, well, nobody ever, wants to talk about da-da-da-da-da. It's like, neither do you, asshole. Like, every fucking time I see you, it's an excuse to, and not you, but it's and the people I'm talking about in general, every time you see them make a post, it's about this fucking topic. At some point, you're no longer trying to educate, you're no longer trying to communicate, you found yourself a soapbox. Get the fuck off of it for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I in my experience, like, it's just, I find I'll forget that the circles I'm in are thinking about a lot of these issues all the time. Oh, and then other people aren't. And like, for example, with this Twitter battle I decided to wage, I had 3 outcomes. 2 people blocked me. And the third person argued with me, and then all of a sudden out of the blue was like, I just checked out your music, it's really great, and followed me and has been liking all my stuff ever since, which I'm like, did I just convert someone? Like, I don't really know what's going on. But he seemed to actually listen to me, unlike the other ones. Right. But while I do agree that, I mean, sometimes people seem so separated, but it's like, when people are telling me that they're getting their facts from Fox News and that's why they know it's right, then I'm kind of like, we're getting a really different set of facts here, and I think mine are actually factual. Right, yeah. So I don't know how to explain that.
Well, and it's funny because like I don't mean to turn this into a political thing specifically, but I've spent some time even just recently, and whenever I say the word reading, I mean listening, because I only listen to audiobooks, I don't read shit anymore. But I just read the Fear book from Woodward.
I don't know that one.
So it came out a couple of months ago, but I can't remember his first name because I'm an idiot. But he's one of the people who like broke Watergate.
Oh, that okay.
Yeah, Woodward and Bernstein Woodward, right? And he wrote a book about the first year and a half or whatever the Trump presidency.
In the White House, yeah.
And the thing that was remarkable to me, because like I've got a lot of respect for him as a reporter. I don't have a lot of respect. I come from a journalism background. I remember a class where we got taught about bias, but I've gone and checked with other people, and I'm not just being facetious. It doesn't seem like anybody else that I know ever remembers being exposed to the idea of media bias.
Oh, that's
I remember it very specifically, and I hold it very, like part of the reason why I do talk about my politics on here a little bit, and clearly I'm a little bit liberal, whatever, but I'm very centrist. As far as I'm concerned, but of course that's everybody. Yeah. Everyone thinks they're exactly. But I try to stay out of politics as much as I can, only because that entire conversation turns into, well, exactly like we were saying. You walk into it, people spout out the ideas that are in their head, and then they're not looking to learn.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's the really frustrating part about.
I had a really good point I was going to, and then we got lost in my own bullshit.
But no, I mean, it's interesting. I don't mind being called out, and I think, not to toot my own horn, but like I think that's a strength, and I've witnessed a couple times in the last few years, like being called out and then being like, oh, okay, like I don't want to be wrong about this. Can you explain to me better, like what I've.
So talk to me about one that you were wrong and got talked about and changed your mind.
Actually, a great example that comes to mind is a dear friend of mine who's like a much better activist than I have ever been. Is really incredible. Simone Schmidt, their project is called The Highest Order and Fiverr. Both really amazing bands in Toronto. Simone is one of the best songwriters, I think, in Canada. Like, really, really incredible stuff. And I was announcing my new record, I think it was on Twitter, and I had talked about a bunch of things. I talked about confronting patriarchy, and I talked about confronting my own privilege, and I had mentioned something about confronting capitalism. And Simone texted me and said, how does your record confront capitalism? And I said, well, and I was like, well, I think that I'm talking about my problems with it in the record. And Simone was like, you're talking about your personal recent understanding that you're not super into it. People who are confronting capitalism are like at a pipeline protesting right now, and you're not doing that. And I realized Simone was right. And so I changed what I said, and I took it out, because the conversation that we had about it was, I don't want to co-opt what other people are doing that's good to help make my art look more woke. And that's not what I was trying to do, but I realized that it could have that effect, and I didn't want to do it. And it was just it was a really interesting dialogue, and at first I felt like I had to defend my work, but then I realized that they were coming from a really good point of view that was right. And then what was cool about it was that after someone texted me and was like, thank you so much for being open to having the discussion. I'm always worried that I'm going to deeply offend someone for questioning their language. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm so glad you're questioning my language. I would so much rather be questioned than to be spouting bullshit out into the world like everybody else.
Right?
Not everybody else, but a lot of people co-opt a lot of things. Like I see it right now, and I'm not trying to be a caller outer, but a lot of people are trying to use feminism right now to sell their music, who are often not making art that has any feminist basis.
They're saying,
like, we're women.
I have a vagina, so
exactly.
And that's really what
But like, women should be empowered and all that, but when you're using, I just sometimes see words being co-opted to sell, and I don't like that, and I don't want to be that.
That's actually really interesting that you brought that up, because one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about is, I don't know that I've had another guest on, because I have had other women on the show, but I don't know that I've had other guests that are as specifically educated as you are. But you said, and maybe it's just because I'm a white male and I felt offended naturally or whatever, but when you talked about confronting the patriarchy, it reminded me of I was, especially now, like understanding the limited range that the show has after 2 years. Very early on, like before we even introduced the video, the first year of this show, I had somebody reach out and say, hey, like, what's going on? Why don't you have any women on your show? And I mean, when I say any, at the time, I think I was like 8 or 9 episodes into the show.
And you had nothing.
And it wasn't, and like I wrote to him, it was actually a guy that wrote me and asked me this. And I wrote to him, and I said, it's not by design. Like, I didn't come out here going like, can't wait to fuck over all the women. Like,
of course
it's when you do this stuff, and because you're independent as well, basically you do whatever you have access to in front of you.
Yeah, of course.
So talk to me about, because you talk about confronting the patriarchy, but I kind of get the idea that you might be talking about confronting the patriarchy in art and entertainment more specifically, or is that just...
So I don't think so. Well, there's a bunch of things. First of all, like, I'd had some bad experiences in the arts and entertainment industry that I felt were sexist, for sure, and I did want to confront those.
Talk to me about some of that experience before I trample on you, because like it's interesting to me, because, and I really want to hear the story, but you hear that a lot. You hear like there's sexism in the industry. I want to know, and I mean it's tough. Talk to me about the specifics. Talk to me. So people who are watching this, they go, oh, you know, fucking whatever. What are you talking about here?
Well, when I first started music, like, I'd go into Long McQuaid and I'd get treated like I didn't know anything. Okay. And to be fair, I didn't know a ton, but I felt really condescended all the time. And even when I started to really know what I was talking about, I still felt condescended. I do want to say, I've noticed a big change in that in the last 2 years, and I'm really impressed by that. I notice the vibe has changed, and I can feel the conversations that are happening in this industry taking effect. And it might be slow, but it is happening. Mm-hmm. I don't feel that way anymore. Okay. No, or at least far less. I worked on a team that was all men on a project. I don't want to get too into like who it was and what I was doing, but I quickly learned that I wasn't allowed to get as passionate about my opinions as everyone else, because it was deemed, it was a buzzkill for the men. And I was pretty furious about that, because in the project, I felt like I had the most experience on what we were working on to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. But I was really aware that I had to temper my opinions, and
so interesting.
It sucked. And so actually the song Doubt Mouth on our new record is about that. It's about speaking up and not swallowing your ideas because you're afraid of being labeled like too much or a bitch. But I think to circle back and answer your question about confronting patriarchy, it happens in all these different ways. Like, I have a song on the record about getting catcalled, and a particular time it was like these three men, I was walking alone, yelled something like extremely vulgar to me that I don't want to say on the internet or ever again about, well, it was just horrible. And I wrote about what I would want to respond. So like those are examples of confronting like rape culture and patriarchy. But the biggest learning curve for me in writing this record was realizing how much of patriarchy is in me too. Like, I learned
that was it's funny that you went there, because that's exactly where I was going with that. And so and it comes back to like my interest in psychology, because I read a lot of studies about, like, one in particular, this great article in The Atlantic, and it's from 2014, but I think it still stands true. It's called The Confidence Gap. And it's about how women in our culture here in North America are brought up to be quieter than men. They are not rewarded, like, it's about how in the classroom when you're a kid, if a boy's loud, they're like, oh, boys will be boys. And if a girl's too chatty, they're like, she's not good. And it's different. And even when I think about when I was in university, the difference between men had so much confidence to put up their hands and no fear of being wrong. And all the women I knew had a horrible fear of being wrong. And that's in this article too. And it's like, it's proven to be a thing. It's so interesting to me, because I wonder, and this is, it's I don't spend time studying and it's just one of those like floating thoughts that have passed in my head. I'm clearly a white male, but I'm also the father to 2 daughters, mm-hmm. and I'm a husband to a wife, and you know, I happen to dig people in general.
That's
half
good.
of them tend to be women.
That's awesome.
When this conversation comes up, I've been a guy almost my entire life. So whenever this conversation comes up, you hear about the patriarchy, and you hear and privilege, white privilege is another one, and I'm not even talking about white privilege. It's
just privilege in your various ways.
Yeah. Whether it's male privilege, white privilege, fucking
a lot of kinds.
Right? The idea gets presented like the person accepting the privilege or whatever is sitting back and going, fine. And it's not even about that. I
don't think it is that way.
But it gets presented, like, the argument against it.
It can definitely feel
the argument against it is always, come look at my fucking life and tell me how privileged I am.
Totally. And I think that's a fair point, because, I mean, I think that privilege is so complicated, because, like, for example, I may have less privilege in ways because I'm a woman, but I have a lot more privilege in another way because I'm white, and because I grew up with parents that stayed together and like paid for my university education, and like all these other kinds of privilege.
Well,
you know?
And there is also in that fucking weird conversation, because I'm not and this is the problem. I'm about to say one of the things that like pissed off white guys say, okay. But I don't mean it like that. I mean it in like, okay, like step back for a second and let's look at reality. Women have privileges too. They're just different privileges. Like Like, I've never once, and I'm not saying you have, but I've never walked one time into a bar and thought, oh, I'm going to get a drink. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't have money in my pocket, I'm going to be able to. And I'm not saying that that's, I'm not saying that's.
But like, have you ever had to walk home with your keys between your fingers?
No, I'm not, no, and I'm not, please, and I'm not weighing them.
That's for me the difference, because like, I've never gone into a bar and expected anyone to buy me a drink, but that's fine. And actually, and sometimes it's cool when someone does. Sometimes it's nice.
I'm not even, no, and that's not what I'm taking. That's not what I mean. And yes, I have had to walk down the street with keys, not because of the rape thing, but because
if you felt threatened.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
And I'm not, and again, and that's why I like billboarded it. I'm saying the thing that stupid white guys say.
There are different privileges, and I think that's really important.
I think it's about how you take the world that's in front of you. And again, it's not discounting availability and all of that stuff, but I think in a lot of circumstances, and I think why you get, even politically, why you'll get women Republicans arguing against whatever it is because that issue with identity politics, and again, even using that term kind of throws me on a side, but that issue with identity politics is what you do is you say, this is who I am. And the problem with that idea is it's exactly the same thing as this is who you are.
So I agree. I think identity politics are really tricky, and they're complicated, and it's not an easy way to make anything good happen in a lot of ways. But
super important.
What I did find when reading these studies, and I think this is what was interesting, because it helped me back up, like maybe I had a feeling that I was being treated not as well for some reason, but then sometimes I'd find a study that'd be like, nope, that's not just you. So for example, they did this blind test where they had a bunch of psych study participants interact with what was actually a simulation of, it was a computer bot, but they didn't know that. And it was a simulated courtroom, and they were supposed to be on a jury, and they didn't know that this one person on the jury was this like, they're like the point of the study. And this person would make a really impassioned speech trying to get everyone to agree with them on the jury. And when everyone thought it was a man, they rated him as confident, strong, right, smart. Well, the woman was shrill, there was like stubborn, emotional. The text was literally the same. And overwhelmingly, everyone judged the woman differently. So that's a real thing.
Oh no, there's also in symphony orchestras. Now, for any good one, if you audition, you audition behind a curtain.
That's smart.
Like in New York in all of the biggest ones, you audition behind it.
Because it eliminates bias.
But there was a study that was done, exactly like you're talking about, where they just came in and they did the study. And now, I don't know if I'm making up complete bullshit in my head or if I'm remembering. There is something to do with this study that was so interesting that initially they saw no change, like when they were covered and not covered, and then they realized every one of the women who was auditioning was wearing high heels. So when they were walking up, you could tell if it was male or female.
Interesting.
And there was no change from when they could see them.
And then
when they eliminated the shoes,
really?
It went from
fascinating, right?
Completely. It went completely down the middle to more men than women.
Yeah. So I mean, this is such a big topic. Obviously, like neither of us have the answer to.
We're talking about very specific things.
Well, and I just think the world that we're living right now, it seems really impossible to find a way to bridge these gaps between these polarized things, and there's so many different polarized things about politics, about feminism, about patriarchy, about indigenous rights, about Black Lives Matter. Like, people have differing opinions and they don't want to hear. But I guess to come back to all of that is just that I think we need to listen. And what I like about doing research that's not based on emotion, but it's based on science, then it helps you back up. Like, isn't it so interesting that you eliminate the high heels and all of a sudden the women start getting the job?
Right.
And it means how many women have not been getting the job? Like, how shitty would it be if one of your daughters couldn't get an amazing role because it went to the old white boy who went to school with the other old white boy, and it's like that's just that.
It's I've got like 6 different tracks we could like go off on this, but
and I do feel like I should get back to my band soon because they're probably gonna be like,
yeah, no, for sure, yeah, we definitely have to get you back there. It's funny because that's where I was going with this. All of that stuff going in your head, and what we really know, the only thing going through your mind when you're on stage is, why aren't these motherfuckers dancing?
That is true. That is 100% true. I love dancing, obviously, and I get bummed when everyone, like especially in Toronto, like people like to watch shows very still with their arms closed, and it's fun to go to smaller towns because people get a little more dancey, I find, often.
Well, I hope we get a bunch of dancey over.
We'll see.
It's going to be fun. Thank you for hanging out. This was so much fun.
Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely check out.
Thanks for the good chat.
Oh yeah, it was a good one. Definitely check out for Esme. They're fantastic. We've got, I don't know if the performance video will come out first or the interview or whatever, but it's either coming up or was last week. Go check that out. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to go down and click on the subscribe button to make sure that you can continue seeing our episodes as we put them out. We do a lot of videos, and there's a couple of them here that we hope you'll enjoy. There's one up there that we think you might like, and of course, there's one of our playlists down there for you. Make sure you say hello to some of our sponsors in the links down below while you're there, and of course, you can find links there to today's guest and all of our other social media. Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time.